Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. They've been with us since our very first season on air in 2021. Walters is located just across the street from the ballpark.
Next pitch swung on, line drive left center field. Coming on is Wood. He dives, and he made the catch for the out. James Wood coming straight in, the ball slicing off the bat of the left-hand hitter at the last moment. And he makes a diving catch. And he came full speed and with authority with a headlong dive to make the play, coming straight in toward the infield.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with Washington Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman of NatsJournal.com. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. MLB's 2026 exhibition season is underway. The Nats are 4-2-1. No, they have not joined the NHL. They had a 5-all tie against the Philadelphia Phillies this past Monday. So 4-2-1 in the Grapefruit League. Started off 4-0-1, but 2 consecutive losses since. And that will conclude our analysis of the Nats exhibition record. As we know, MLB teams' exhibition records mean next to nothing, but it is good to have baseball being played, and it is good to have you with us as we draw closer to opening day, which is March 26th. This episode of Nats Chat is brought to us by the Golf Yards in Ballston, the DMV's new home for elite indoor golf training. The Nats are getting ready for their season. Make sure that your swing is ready too. Visit thegolfyards.com to secure your spot at the Golf Yards in Ballston. So, exhibition baseball is a funny deal. Yes, it is baseball, but also, yes, it is a distorted, skewed version of baseball from which you never know what you should take and what you should ignore. For instance, the Nats this past Sunday had a 16-8 win over the Miami Marlins, a game in which Nats third baseman Brady House hit 2 home runs. More on him coming up in a bit. But the Marlins in that game used 11 pitchers who combined for, you ready for this, 13 walks, 4 hit by pitches, and 8 wild pitches. Mark, you were there. That right there, to me, is exhibition baseball in a nutshell. What happened between the Nats and Marlins this past Sunday?
Oh, I was there, and it was real, and it was spectacular, Al. And what you didn't even point out is that it was 16-1 going into the bottom of the ninth, and the poor minor league pitcher who the Nats put out there to close it out couldn't even finish the ninth before giving up 7 runs and turning it into a 16-8 game, especially early, these February games where the starting pitchers are going 2 innings tops, the position players get 2 at-bats tops, and you're often seeing guys who are not even in big league camp. You know, they have these minor league players who just get called up for the day to finish out these games. And I feel like this year we're seeing it even more than ever before. And that's why you do have to be careful about interpreting too much from the outcomes of these games. You know, God bless them, these kids who are getting a chance to pitch in quote unquote big league games, and some of them cannot find the plate, and maybe you're feeling the pressure of what it's like to be in that situation. So some of these games can get pretty ugly. There have been some good, encouraging signs on an individual basis, but I'm being careful not to read too much into overall what we've seen here from the first week of games.
Yeah, you are cautious and careful when it comes to performances. We are cautious and careful when it comes to lineup decisions. At the same time, it has been hard not to notice the fact that James Wood was in right field for 2 of the last 3 days, was in right field again for this game on Thursday. Dalen Lyle was in left field. Should we be reading into that? Is that a something? Is that more of a nothing? What do you think?
I think it's a something. It may not be a huge thing yet, but something to keep an eye on. And the answer to it is Blake Butera said that essentially they want everybody to feel comfortable at all these different spots. You never know how it's all going to play out over the course of the year. James Wood did play a lot more right field than left field in the minors. Remember, he mostly was a center fielder in the minors, and it wasn't until those last few weeks before they called him up that he started playing left field for the first time, because that's where the need was. At that point, you had Lane Thomas in right and Jacob Young in center, so they knew that the opening was in left. And so James Wood, kind of by default, has been a left fielder ever since. But he has told Butera that he likes right field, that he has played it more growing up, that he would be comfortable giving it a shot. Over there, we know that Dalen Lyle struggled defensively last year, so maybe left field considered the lesser position. There might be some logic behind all this. I think the key to it is if they do have a 4-man or even 5-man, outfield rotation? Well, we know that Jacob Young is going to be in center field anytime he's in the lineup. And so if he is, and if Dylan Cruz is playing, are you going to put Cruz in left? We have not seen that yet. Because Jacob Young has been out with a little minor wrist injury, he should make his debut, I think, on Friday night. Dylan Cruz has only played center. So the question would be, if you have an outfield of Wood, Cruz, and Young, what's the alignment? You would think that Dylan Cruz should be in right in that alignment with Wood back and left. So we will see if and when that comes. If that alignment comes and Wood is actually in right field for that, then I think we have something on our hands here where we're talking about they may be making a true position switch.
And with Robert Hassel III, who we saw a good bit of in center as last season went on, center field is still his spot. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, I think it depends who is all out there. They're comfortable with him in center for sure. I think they are comfortable with Cruz in center. There's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. I think one of my takeaways so far from Blake Butera is don't get too caught up in what any particular lineup looks like, and that includes both the batting order and the defensive arrangement. Aside from something like Jacob Young is going to be in center field if he's playing, I think we may be seeing a lot of moving around. He keeps referencing the fact that the Rays in 2020, that was the COVID shortened season, used 59 different lineups in 60 games. And he's not saying that in a negative way. He seems to like that idea. We can get into some of their thought process of what they're going to be doing lineup wise, but it sounds like it is going to be case by case. Who are they facing? Who's playing that day? Different computer models they're going to run that determine what's the best lineup for that given day. So I think you're going to see a lot of guys in a lot of different spots this spring. And the idea being that come opening day, we may not see the same group out there every day or 2 days in a row. They may mix and match a lot to try to optimize who they have against that given opponent.
I love it. I think it's so intriguing. I think it's exciting. I also think, though, it is a function in part of them trying to figure out what they have. You know, when you have certainty, when you know that this guy is our guy at this spot and this other guy is our guy at that other spot, you're not doing a ton of mixing and matching. But in this case, this is in a lot of ways like a fact-finding season, right? If you're Paul Taboni, you're Blake Butera, you're very much trying to figure out what you have in these people. I do think the James Wood defensive conversation is so interesting because, like you said, he played a lot of center field in the minors. He has been primarily a left fielder in the majors. Left field is the least important defensive outfield position. The outfield hierarchy in terms of defense is center field number 1, right field number 2, left field number 3. So it's a little odd, right, that a guy who was good enough to play center in the minors has been, put in left in the majors. Also with Wood was him initially looking awkward and clumsy defensively in left field, but he has gotten better. And while his overall defensive metrics in left are mixed, he has shown promise and he has shown improvement, I think, in left field. So I wonder if Paul Taboni and Blake Butera look at James Wood and say, he's better than just a left fielder. Let's give him more reps in right field, the more important defensive position, and see what we have here.
Yeah, I agree. If you've only seen him play in the major leagues, you don't necessarily think to yourself, good defensive outfielder. But the reputation in the minor leagues was that he was good. And as you said, played a ton of center field. They would not have had him out there if they didn't think he was capable of it. Now, is he going to play center field ahead of Jacob Young or Dylan Cruz or even Robert Hassel? No, I can't see that happening. Even if he was good, I don't think he's going to outplay those guys. But he does have a decent arm. He may be more comfortable in right. If you have an alignment where Lyle is your third outfielder, the worst defensive outfielder of that group, it would make sense to put Wood in the more high profile position. Let's remember there's also the DH they're going to be, using interspersed between all these guys. So I am very interested to see how this all goes. I do know this. James Wood wants to really work on his defense. It was a priority for him this winter. He is not interested in being a DH at this point in his career. He's not interested in being a first baseman at this point in his career. I point that out because for those who may have read on natsjournal.com, I had an opportunity for readers, subscribers of mine, to submit questions to be asked of Blake Butera. And one of the questions I got, and we've heard this ourselves, we've speculated about this, is there any thought to James Wood being a first baseman? And Butera's answer was essentially, it's not a crazy question to ask. Perhaps down the road someday that may be something we look at. But for now, he's still young. He has been a good outfielder before. He is motivated to want to be a good outfielder. And so we're going to focus on that for now. And maybe we're seeing some of that in right field. Now, he didn't shut that door completely. I don't think you're going to see it this year. But maybe down the road someday, James Wood at first base is a possibility. For now, all effort is on the outfield. And I would just be curious, because we also hear about this with young players. Is it best to stay at one position and just work on that and be your best at that one position? Or is it okay to bounce from one side to the other? Left and right fields, the ball is coming at you from very different angles. The way the ball comes off the bat, completely different. So is that helping you or hurting you if you are moving between the two? I'm not sure the answer to that. We'll see how that all plays out. I do have a little concern with that. I kind of feel like somebody as important as James Wood, pick his spot, whatever that is, get him to work every day and get him comfortable there instead of trying to master two positions at once.
I also would say with a guy like James Wood, again, if you're athletic and skilled enough to have played center in the minors, you shouldn't just be parked at first base early in your MLB career. Like, if you're good enough to play center in the minors, let's see where that athleticism can take us in the majors. If you're going to slide a guy all the way down the defensive spectrum to where he's at first base, 2-3 years into his MLB career, to me, that's you're really tapping out on him as a defensive player. I would much rather, exhaust him as an outfielder, see what you have here, work with him, and then you start doing something like putting him at first base. Yeah, that has come up a lot. Like, maybe James Wood should play first base. How about we see what he is as an outfielder before we give up on him as an outfielder? I mean, the guy who I wonder about is Dalen Lyle. Dalen Lyle really struggled defensively last season in right field, and I wonder if he struggles again this season, if maybe he's the guy, maybe he's the outfielder who gets moved to first base.
I don't know about first base because he's not a big guy. Now, he can move. We know that, but you ideally want a nice big target at first. I do know this. Dalen told me earlier this spring he does not want to be pigeonholed as a DH at age 23. So likewise, he's been working hard at it. But there comes a point when you put your lineup together and you say, we want our three best defensive outfielders out there, and Lyle is down the list. He's not going to do that. Now, if you have a team that is, as we know, rebuilding, and maybe it's not necessarily important to put your absolute best defense out there on a daily basis, you could see him. But if we get to a point that this team is trying to win and be competitive, it's going to be hard to argue that he should be out there. And so he may find himself having to DH or learning another position if that's the case. So we'll see. He needs the most work out of all of them. It was noticeable last year how he did struggle out there. Not as much with throws, but like going back to the wall, retrieving balls in the corner. It was a little odd to me that he looked so uncomfortable out there.
Yeah, it was rough. And as great as he was as a batter, and he was great, I think his defense is what really hurt him in the candidacy for National League Rookie of the Year. I think he would have been taken more seriously in that regard had the defense just been decent, but unfortunately it was not. But again, he was magnificent as a hitter as the season went on.
The Nats are down in West Palm Beach getting dialed in for the season. But the real question is your golf swing ready for spring? If you're tired of losing strokes early in the season, you need to check out the Golf Yards. They are building the most advanced indoor golf performance club in the DMV right here in Ballston, located directly off I-66. This isn't just a simulator bar. It's a true training facility featuring the best tech in the game. TrackMan simulators, well-put putting technology, techno gym, and OxFit strength training that the Olympians and PGA Tours pros use, and a one-of-a-kind short game area with a real sand trap. It is the perfect place to fix your slice, work on your short game, or just escape the weather. They are opening doors in April, but founding memberships are going fast. They are building a community of golfing enthusiasts in the DMV and want you to be part of it. Go to thegolfyards.com right now to lock in your membership before the season starts.
Pitch to Brady House. House launches one deep left field. Way back it goes, and Brady House has his first Major League home run. That's into the second deck in straightaway left. Nationals lead 2-0. Brady House circles the bases for the first time in the major leagues with a long home run against Brandon Woodruff.
So I mentioned Brady House with the 2 homers this past Sunday. We are still talking about microscopic sample sizes in terms of individual player stats this exhibition season. You know, I've seen some angst online about Dylan Cruz. Dylan Cruz doesn't look right. Dylan Cruz is 0 for 6 over 3 games. Can we calm down a little bit on Dylan Cruz and panicking over any Nats player at this point this early in the exhibition season? We got to pace ourselves, people. But with Brady House, you wrote a good piece for Nats Journal about House and about his MLB profile so far. Last season, the overall numbers were not good. He did, though, hit balls hard, but he also had a big-time problem when it came to chasing pitches. And when it comes to harnessing all that Brady House can be, that he's hitting balls hard is great, but now it becomes a question of, okay, elevate balls more and stop chasing. The chasing really was a problem. Where is he at right now in trying to get better at not chasing pitches?
Well, that first game he played this spring was a good sign. 2 home runs, and one of them was off of Sandy Alcantara of the Miami Marlins. So this wasn't off of some, jobber called up from minor league camp for the day. The second one may have been one of those, but they were also both hit to center field, a good sign. He knows the issue there. He had one of the worst chase rates in the majors last season. He didn't have enough at-bats to qualify, but he would have ranked in like the 8th percentile in swinging at pitches out of the zone. Now, when he did make contact, he had one of an above average hard hit percentage. So it does show you that it's in there. It's about pitch selection and recognition. He's always been an aggressive hitter throughout his minor league career. And what he talked about was finding the right balance. He doesn't want to lose who he is. Doesn't want to just say, I'm going up there looking to take pitches all the time. But it's about going up there and having a plan, knowing where he's looking for a pitch and what location, what type of pitch, and being aggressive on those and not just swinging out of his shoes at everything. He chased so much out of the zone last year. So that's his number one priority. He knows that they're working with him on it. I also, and I mentioned this in the article, that he came up last year. It was right in the middle of that 11-game losing streak, really a low point for the team. A couple weeks later, the manager and the GM get fired. He now is playing out the string the rest of the season with a team that was going nowhere. And I'm sure it was not the ideal circumstances for him to be getting acclimated to the big leagues. So while it was disappointing in a lot of ways, I think he deserves a shot at working with this new group coming into the season, knowing the job is his. There's no real competition for him at third base. I mean, Jose Tena, Trey Lipscomb, Nasim Nunez, although we haven't seen him at third yet. These are all backups if they make the team. There is nobody that's seriously contending with Brady House for the starting third base job. So they're going to let him sink or swim. It's up to him to prove that he can be the guy. The first thing he can do, better pitch selection at the plate and start showcasing that loud contact he can make by swinging at the right pitches.
Looked good defensively for a good chunk of his time at the major league level last season, which is really good to see. It's so interesting with the Nats offense last season. There was so much that went so wrong, as we know. But if you say, well, give me a positive from last regular season for the Nats. Did you know that the Nats per StatCast were top 10 in the majors in both team average exit velocity and team hard hit percentage? The Nats last season legitimately were really good at hitting balls hard. The problem was that the Nats were terrible at elevating balls, dead last in the majors in average launch angle, 9.9. And the Nats had some guys who had a real issue when it came to chasing pitches out of the strike zone. But to me, the hard part is hitting the balls hard. And the Nats actually had that part down last season, as amazing as that sounds given how underwhelming the offense was for so much of the season. But, we would talk about it, how there were games in which the offense actually looked quite good. And we were like, man, how come this offense can look outstanding one game and then just go silent, for these painfully long stretches? And I do think when you drill down on some of these guys here, and, Brady House comes to mind, Dylan Cruz comes to mind, they have the hard part down. They hit balls hard. That's, I think, the most important thing. Now it's just a question of being more disciplined and elevating balls. And you do that, you'll get the offensive results that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think what you saw last year is a lot of pitchers, especially experienced pitchers, pick them apart by keeping the ball down the zone and getting them on changeups and breaking balls and things that were forcing them to reach and hit the ball into the ground. That was their number one issue. They were hitting balls up in the zone, I think, a lot better than the pitches at the knees or even below the knees. So that's got to be a point of emphasis. When we talked to Matt Borg-Schulte, the new hitting coach, after he was hired, he was asked about the whole launch angle thing. And I thought it was interesting. He said that, yes, it's important, but he's not necessarily somebody who just focuses on that. The idea is to swing at the right pitches, to hit the ball hard. And if you do all the other things right, the launch angle should come with it. That you shouldn't necessarily go up there trying to hit the ball in the air, that can throw you off and take you out of what your true ability is. So it's really more about pitch recognition, trusting your hitting abilities. And then if you do all those things right, you are going to hit the ball hard and you're going to hit it in the air to cause some damage. So we'll see. Again, it's only a few games, so it's hard to read too much into it. But that's something I'm going to be looking for a lot as we get going closer to opening day and once the season begins. Can House and Cruz and Wood, even Garcia and Ruiz, if he's in the lineup, can they take a lot of those hard hit ground balls and elevate them into line drives? And most importantly, can they just not swing at those pitches that opposing pitchers are trying to get them to chase? We know what a savvy, think about some of the pitchers who dominated them last year. It was Eric Fetty, it was Miles Michaelis, who's now part of the Nationals. These are not overpowering guys. They hit fastballs well. It's the breaking balls, it's the soft stuff that they struggled with. Let's see if they can make that adjustment. And it doesn't mean hitting those pitches better. It means taking them and not swinging at them in the first place.
One of the things that drove all of us nuts with the Nats last season and, in other seasons too, the mental lapses, the base running mistakes. You asked Blake Butera about that via a reader question for NatsJournal.com. I think it's so tricky at spring training, right? Like, how much truly do these drills help versus how much are these drills just like eating up time? Spring training is long. These days are long. And sometimes you just wonder if maybe people just aren't going through the motions. At the same time, young ball club, new regime trying to assert itself, a team that has had way too many gaffes / screw-ups / blunders on the base pass, especially in recent years. What are you seeing them do in that regard? And what do you think the approach is here from Paul Taboni and Blake Butera?
It is certainly a point of emphasis this spring, and not that every team, doesn't do this kind of stuff, but where they've taken it a step further, what I've seen here so far, the last few days, they were running what I think you would call a chaos drill. It's a sort of definition of it, which is essentially it's game situations. And you have both defense out there and you have base runners. And the coach will call out, okay, first and second, 1 out, tie game in the 9th inning, things like this. And then the coach puts the ball in play. They hit it, to the gaps or come back or to the mound, whatever it may be. And now it's up to everybody out there to respond the proper way and play it out as though it was a real situation. And what they're doing that you don't necessarily see all the time is they're playing at full speed. They're telling the base runners slide. You don't see sliding a lot in practice because you worry about injuries and things like that. They're telling them go ahead and slide. They're getting into rundowns. Guys are supposed to hit cutoff mans. And if there's a throw to the plate, they want the trailing runner running to second, and then maybe try to throw him out. A lot of these kind of situations that we know come up in the course of games. Are they prepared to handle those correctly when they come up? So the good part is in these practices, they're working on this stuff and seeming to do some things right. The bad part is, at least through the first week games, they're still making just as many, if not more, of these same pretty ghastly mistakes that we've seen. Less so on the bases. It's been more of a defensive thing, and especially the pitchers. They had a string there of like 3-4 straight days where a pitcher made a fielding mistake on what we would call a routine play. The term PFP, pitcher's fielding practice, it's a staple of spring training. Everybody does it. They work on it all the time. And anytime somebody makes a good play during the season, you'll hear the announcer say, well, that's why they work on it in spring training. Well, you can work on it all you want, but when the game comes, if you can't complete the play, what's the point? What good is that? So far, despite all the points of emphasis on this, they look very much like the sloppy defensive team that we've seen, especially from their pitchers.
I have made a vow to myself that I am not going to ignite the conversation that you and I have around this time every year, which is this year the Nats are good defensively? Because you and I have had that conversation, I believe, every March since we started doing this podcast in 2021. So I will not bring up that topic because every year we talk ourselves into thinking, hey, maybe this is the year the Nats are good defensively again. And every year we end up being disappointed.
It's true. And it's why you do have to be so careful that spring training is not the same as the regular season. And, again, you work on all this stuff. But as we know, come July, are you going to be hearkening back to what you did on February 26th on Field 3 in West Palm Beach? Like, does that make a difference when there's a key situation late in the game and the opposing hitter puts down a squeeze bunt? Are you confident that the pitcher and the catcher and everybody else are going to appropriately field that play because of what they worked on months earlier? And it's hard to do these things in season. They can call in guys to come in for early work, but you can't really do the full team out there defensive drills in the middle of the season. The schedule is just not built that way. So you can practice all you want. You can work on this stuff. Sometimes it just comes down to whether these guys are good at it. And even more than that, whether they have the instincts and the composure that when something happens in a big moment in a game, can they treat it like it is the backfield in West Palm Beach and not get spooked by the play? I think that's been maybe one of the biggest issues. It's not that they aren't talented or able to make these plays. It's that the moment comes and they can't handle it and they panic. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for coaching staff to get through to them. I will be fascinated to see how it goes. Until we see them master it, I'm going to have my doubts and be skeptical.
Big thanks to our sponsor, BetterHelp, for partnering with us for this important conversation about mental health.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 show on YouTube. So having a counselor and working with BetterHelp, that gives you an opportunity to really start to unpack. But people don't understand, when you unpack things, you also open up a box that you're not always sure what's inside. So I think that's why seeing a professional is extremely important. If you need someone to open up to, visit BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/89 to get started.
Now the pitch to Jamer Candelario is belted to deep left field. This ball is going, and gone. Goodbye. 6 rows deep toward left center field. Bang! Zoom goes Jamer Candelario with his 11th home run of the year. And the second home run of the day for the Nationals. And the Nationals have themselves a 2-run lead here in the top of the 5th inning. It's Washington 5 and Philadelphia 3.
I was thinking about this the other day. So something that we had been seeing during the Nats rebuilding years here was them signing multiple veterans each offseason, presumably for the purpose of flipping those veterans come the trade deadline. And these signings did not always work out, as we know. There were some successes. Jamer Candelario comes to mind. There were some misses. Nelson Cruz, Joey Gallo come to mind. The Nats have done so little in terms of player acquisition since the end of last season. Paul Taboni has basically told us we're restarting the rebuild. Why do you think it is that Taboni hasn't signed many, if any, potential trade chips, veterans to 1-year contracts, veterans with upside who, if they, catch fire for a couple of months, you can maybe turn into some prospects? And I have a theory for why this hasn't happened. I know there is the cynical theory of Paul Taboni doesn't have money to spend, and maybe that is the answer, okay? But I do think there could be something else here, but I'd like to get your take on it first. Why do you think that, unlike in the Mike Rizzo, Davey Martinez years of the rebuild, we're not seeing obvious potential trade chips here in terms of veteran players for the Nats?
I don't think it's truly a money issue. I think the money issue would be more along the lines of not signing more prominent players to like multi-year contracts. I think if he went to ownership and said, hey, I want to go sign Rhys Hoskins to play first base, which, by the way, he just signed with Cleveland for like $2 million or something, like on a non-roster deal. I think that's truly a sign that Taboni doesn't see the value in bringing in players like that. And I think it boils down to a couple things. Number one, I don't think he's that concerned with trying to squeeze out a few more wins on this team. I don't think to him it matters if they win 65 games or 70 games. Obviously he wants to do well, but he knows this is year one of his tenure, and he's not under pressure necessarily to compete or to have a record this year that reflects well on him. So I don't think he is that concerned with those like marginal gains on the team's record. And I think also there may be a little bit of the idea of, it sounds great. You pick up a veteran, he has a good 3-4 months, and then you trade him and you get something in return. What do you really get back for these guys on the 1-year deals? You hope you get something. I mean, look, Jamer Candelario, they got DJ Hurst. That may work out in the end. We don't know. Hurst is coming back from Tommy John. Who knows what he's going to be? Ahmed Rosario was a nice pickup for them last year. They got Clayton Beater. Maybe that turns out to be a great move for them. But for the most part, those guys on 1-year expiring contracts don't bring back a ton in return. So I think the thought there is we're better served seeing as many young guys as we can and trying to find out who is a part of this long term or not. And to spend some extra money on veterans who we know are not part of the long term plan, who aren't going to make that big a difference in the 1-loss record this year, and who may not bring that much back in a trade anyways in July, that it's just not valuable to us to do that. They've done a few. Miles Michaelis is going to fit that description. I think that's a case of we need innings in the rotation. They just had nobody they could guarantee is going to give them 150 innings. So I think he fits that. And we know that the bullpen there's so few experienced guys there. So say a C&L Perez and a Drew Smith, that makes some sense. But I think for the most part, it's really more about not thinking that there's that much value in bringing in these 1-year, hope they recapture the old Magic kind of contracts. I think he'd rather put young players out there.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of this may come down to. That if you're Paul Taboni and you're Blake Butera and you look at what has been happening with the Nats during these rebuilding years, the team too often has wasted playing time and wasted plate appearances on veteran roads to nowhere. And I think that the front office may look at this as, like you said, first of all, what are the odds truly that you get something significant back for a guy? First of all, the guy's to play well. That's a risk in and of itself. Then it's what you get back for the guy and whether whatever you get back ends up panning out for you. But there's also, if you give this guy 400, 500, 600 plate appearances, you're taking away meaningful playing time from somebody else, presumably somebody younger, somebody who could be developing. I mean, I think a lot of Nats fans still have nightmares about Cesar Hernandez in the 2022 regular season getting 617 plate appearances, or Nelson Cruz that regular season getting 507 plate appearances. And you think about that and it's like, what was the point? I mean, just total waste of time in terms of what those plate appearances did for the Nats, not just in terms of that season, but in terms of the long haul. And so, yeah, I do think that what you're seeing here is something different, is a departure from what we had been seeing, and is refreshing, which is a true commitment to youth and to new blood and to, hey, we're going to ride the kids. And look, it may be ugly. It may be really ugly, but it may also be a beautiful thing. And it may be something that starts out bumpy March, April, May. And then all of a sudden we see a corner be turned, come June, July, August, September, that kind of thing. And I think that's a big difference from what we had been seeing in these previous seasons.
So I agree with you with one caveat to that. It has nothing to do with on the field. It has to do with behind the scenes. And we've talked about this, the lack of leadership. And they really did not make any attempt to sign anybody from a position player standpoint to come in and show the young guys how it's done. And I understand that maybe a Rhys Hoskins or somebody comparable on a short-term deal, maybe that doesn't really accomplish what you would be hoping for anyways, because as we've discussed, it's hard to be a real leader when you're one of these hired guns who may only be here for 4 months on a 1-year deal and then traded. So I understand that. I would have liked to see them do something more, and I guess first base would have been the position of bringing in somebody who could truly help show the young guys how to play the game, keep everybody in line in the clubhouse, make sure that everybody's heads are up when they are going through these losing streaks. And Taboni and Butera have been asked this, and they basically shoot down the premise. They don't see that that is important. They believe that the coaching staff can hold guys accountable and that ultimately the players will hold themselves accountable. That's great if it works out. I hope it does. But I do still have real concerns about that. And I think it may have been a little short-sighted on their part not to at least consider the importance of bringing in a veteran for that reason.
Who do you think is the bad cop on Blake Butera's coaching staff? Is it the bench coach, Michael Johns?
It's a great question. I haven't gotten to know them all enough yet to know. Typically, if you have a very player-friendly manager, yeah, you try to have a bench coach who can do that. Johns is the only, I'm using air quotes, old member of the staff. He's 50, but he's the only one even approaching that age. So, maybe it is someone like that. I'm interested to see. I think Blake does seem to have it in him. He obviously hasn't needed to do it yet, but he admitted in one of our conversations the other day that he knows there's going to come a time when the team's not doing well. And he knows that it's going to be hard to keep them all motivated and going. And so I'm curious to see how he handles those situations. I've got to believe, just given his managerial background in the minor leagues, I'm sure he's had to have tough conversations before. I'm sure he's had to sit a guy for whatever disciplinary reason. I'll be interested to see how that goes when the time does come. And is it something that he does in any way in public? Or is he the kind of guy that tries to keep it completely in private so that we never actually see it ourselves?
We are now more than a week removed from any veteran acquisitions for the Nats during spring training, right? We've seen Miles Mikolas, a starting pitcher. We've seen a couple of relievers get signed to minor league contracts, Encino Perez and Drew Smith. It's interesting now. In modern MLB free agency, you do now have a very legitimate last wave of free agency in terms of, say, the week or so before spring training camps open. And then as camps are opening, a lot of guys sign now. It's almost serving as like an artificial deadline, the start of spring training camps. And you see a bunch of signings take place. But with nothing for the last week now for the Nats in terms of acquisitions, do you think we're done with any veterans being signed? Or do you think it's still possible that somebody gets signed here in terms of a pitcher or maybe even a position player?
I'm guessing they're done unless there's an injury or some other glaring need that they realize that they have. They got the two relievers who have some experience, so I would think they feel comfortable with what they're doing there. They got the innings eater in Mikolas. Again, at the first base was the only spot in the field that I felt like maybe they would do something. If they were going to do it, they would have done it by now. Hoskins would have made some sense. He clearly was affordable and they decided no. So I don't know who else they would then get instead for that reason. So I think this is probably who they're going to be going into the season. Again, barring an injury that might change the dynamic somewhat. You could always bring in somebody else on a minor league deal, but you start to run the risk pretty soon. You bring in a guy, especially a pitcher, and there's not enough time for them to be ready for opening day. We have not seen Perez or Drew Smith make their game debut yet. I think it should be happening in the next few days. My understanding is each of them threw live batting practice in the last couple of days. So hopefully they're ready for game action. Mikolas is going to make his spring game debut on Friday night against the Astros. But think about it. It's been several weeks since those guys were signed and they're just now up to speed. You sign someone else at this point, it's going to be mid-March probably before they're game ready. And is that really serving the purpose at that point?
This installment of Nats Chat brought to us by the Golf Yards in Ballston, the DMV's new home for elite indoor golf training. The Nats are getting ready for their season. Make sure that your swing is ready as well. Visit thegolfyards.com to secure your spot. We're coming to you on about a once-per-week basis during Nats spring training before we get going for the regular season, during which we give you a fresh episode of Nats Chat for the morning after every Nats game day. Spread the word. We appreciate you listening very much. But if you know someone who is looking for more Nats content, tell them about the Nats Chat podcast. Again, we're with you for the morning after every Nats game day during the regular season. And of course, keep checking out the great work that Mark is doing at natsjournal.com. I know you said that it was a plan to do what you did in terms of submitting reader questions to Blake Butera. I thought that worked out really well. I enjoyed reading that. Some good questions and some interesting responses, I thought, from Butera.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. So I opened it up to my founding members. That's people who don't just purchase the annual subscription, but actually go a level above to pay some extra for it. And I have a good number of them, and I got a lot of questions submitted. I was not able to come anywhere close to using them all. So I had to pare it down. I think it was 11 that I chose in the end. And some of them were similar, and so I kind of combined them into one all-encompassing question. But they were very good questions, and some things that we think about and talk about ourselves, but some things that maybe we don't always think about. And I'll tell you what, I give Blake Butera a lot of credit. First, for being game to do this. When I presented the idea to him, he was all for it. And then as I was asking him the questions the other day, he was getting into it. And you could see that he was impressed with the quality of the questions that he was getting from fans. It's just another reminder. We know it. We talk about it. how savvy the Nats fan base is. This is an intelligent group of fans who cares deeply about the team and knows how to ask a quote-unquote tough question, as you like to say it, but do it in a respectful way. I pointed out in my email to everyone to submit these, like, if you send me a question and it's going to be disrespectful to the manager, I'm not going to use it. So I give people credit for asking, a couple of tougher type questions, but doing it in a way that was completely respectful. And Butera had no problem with any of them in that regard. I'm hoping to do many more of these, whether it's with Blake, whether it's with Paul Taboni, some players, some other people along the way. We'll see. But it was a nice, refreshing way to do this, and a reminder that it's not always just about us, that fans have a voice in this too. They do think of things that we don't always think of, and it's worth getting that out there and giving the manager a chance to hear not just what we think, but what the fans think as well.
You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find Mark on X at Mark Zuckerman. You can find me on X at Al Galdi. We are on Blue Sky as well, if you prefer that, at Nats Chat Podcast on Blue Sky. And you can email the podcast if you like, natschatpodcast@gmail.com, including if you would like to advertise on or sponsor the podcast. Contact the man who founded the show, who runs the show, the great Tim Shovers. Again, that email address, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. All Nats radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
When you're starting to pile up that many home runs, Dave, you're in the 450 range and beyond, you're keeping company with Hall of Famers.
Yeah, many have reached that mark, are in. And usually if they're not, they're extenuating circumstances.
1 ball, no strikes. Here's a swing and a drive hit well to deep left center field. On the run and way back there may go, and it is gone. Goodbye. Bang, zoom goes the boomstick with his first home run in a Nationals uniform, sending McNeil and Nimmo racing back to the right corner of the bullpen fence, and it clears for 450th home run of Nelson Cruz's career. Move over, Jeff Bagwell and Vladimir Guerrero. Yaz is up next, and the Nationals lead 1-0.